I sat in my car for what felt like hours, the air thick with disbelief. The text was still there, glowing on my phone screen, refusing to disappear no matter how many times I blinked. Last night was amazing. I miss you already. I read it again, then again, my mind trying to conjure some other explanation, some reason this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, I already knew. The message was from someone named Jake. It had come in late last night, while Amanda was in the shower. Her phone had been sitting on the kitchen counter, unlocked, and I'd glanced at it out of habit. We never kept secrets from each other, or at least, I thought we didn't. I hadn't said anything then. I'd put the phone back down, my heart pounding, and pretended nothing had happened. Amanda came out of the bathroom humming softly, her hair wrapped in a towel. She kissed me on the cheek as she passed, her touch still warm and familiar. But something was different now. I could feel it. Today, I left work early, claiming I had a headache. My coworkers barely looked up as I grabbed my coat and left the office. I wasn't sure where I was going, I just needed to get out to think, to breathe. Instead, I found myself parked in a grocery store lot, staring at that same message on my phone. I thought about our life together. Amanda and I had been married for 8 years. We'd built a home, shared countless memories, and dreamed of a future filled with laughter and love. She was my best friend, my confidant, the one person I thought I could trust completely. But now, that trust was shattered. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that text. I pictured Amanda with someone else, laughing, touching, sharing moments that were supposed to belong to us. I felt like a fool, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I wanted to call her, to confront her right then and there, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear that she'd deny it, that she'd twist my words, that she'd make me doubt what I'd seen. Or maybe it was hope that there was some other explanation, something that would make this all go away. I scrolled through the rest of her messages. Most were harmless, chats with coworkers, reminders from her mom, a few texts from friends. But then I found more messages from Jake. Messages that made my stomach turn. I'll bring the wine this time. Your smile makes everything worth it. When can we meet again? This wasn't a one-time thing. This was ongoing. And Amanda had never said a word. I thought about all the times she'd told me she was working late, all the times she'd canceled plans at the last minute. I remembered the new perfume she'd started wearing, the way she'd been dressing differently. Little things that hadn't seemed like much at the time, but now felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. When I finally went home that evening, Amanda was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're home early. Everything okay?" I forced a smile, my throat tightening. "Just a headache. I needed to get out of the office." She nodded, her smile warm and genuine, so genuine it made me sick. How could she look at me like that, knowing what she'd done? How could she act so normal when she'd been lying to me for who knows how long? I sat down at the table, watching her move around the kitchen. My heart ached as I thought about all the moments we'd shared, all the times I believed her without question. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I didn't know how to start. How do you look the person you love in the eye and accuse them of betrayal? When dinner was ready, we sat across from each other, the clink of silverware the only sound between us. I picked at my food, barely tasting it. Amanda chatted about her day, her words washing over me like white noise. I nodded in the right places, but my mind was miles away. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I put down my fork and looked at her. "Amanda," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, "who's Jake?" She froze, her smile faltering. "Jake? I don't know. Why do you ask?" "I saw his messages," I said quietly. "I saw what he wrote. Don't lie to me." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide and filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, guilt, maybe both. "John," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's not what you think." I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't tell me it's not what I think. I've seen the messages. I know something's going on. Just tell me the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. It just got out of hand. I'm so sorry." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, my heart breaking all over again. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why would you do this? Why didn't you just come to me if something was wrong? She wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. I don't know, she whispered. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you how I was feeling, and then Jake, he was just there. He made me feel. Stop, I said, cutting her off. I couldn't bear to hear her say it. I couldn't bear to hear her talk about how he made her feel. You should have come to me. You should have talked to me before it ever got this far. Amanda reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. John, please, she said, her voice desperate. I know I've hurt you. I know I've made the worst mistake of my life. But I love you. I love our family. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. You should have thought about that before, I said. Before the lies. Before the messages. Before him. Her tears fell freely now, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. I couldn't bring myself to reach out, to tell her it was going to be okay. Because it wasn't. It would never be okay again. That night, I slept on the couch. Amanda stayed in the bedroom, her sobs muffled behind the closed door. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything she'd said. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she could change, that we could find a way back to what we once had. But how do you rebuild trust once it's been broken? How do you look at someone who betrayed you and see the person you fell in love with? By morning, I still didn't have any answers. All I knew was that the life I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a painful new reality I wasn't sure how to face. The days that followed were a haze of silence and awkward avoidance. Amanda tried to talk to me several times, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. Every time she started to explain, to apologize again, I saw Jake's name in my mind, heard his words from the messages. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to hear more excuses. I took on extra hours at work, anything to keep me out of the house. I stayed late, joined after-work gatherings, and spent my free time at the gym or with friends. It wasn't a solution, but it kept me from having to sit across from her at the dinner table, pretending we could still be the couple we once were. But Amanda didn't give up. She ended it with Jake, at least that's what she told me, and she started seeing a counselor on her own. She begged me to join her, to come to couples therapy, to at least sit down and have a serious conversation about where we stood. I said no to every request. I wasn't ready, not then. Eventually, I moved into the guest room. It was a quiet, stark separation of what our marriage had become. I stayed there, barely saying a word to her beyond what was necessary. I told myself I needed time to think, to sort through the anger and betrayal. In truth, I didn't know what I needed. I felt adrift, untethered from the life I'd built. One night, after weeks of near silence, Amanda walked into the guest room. I was sitting on the bed, flipping through a book, pretending to read. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands clasped together. I can't keep doing this, she said quietly. I know I've hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I need to know if you can see any way forward for us. If you can ever forgive me. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I put the book down and looked at her. She seemed so small, so unlike the confident, vibrant woman I'd fallen in love with. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. I don't know, Amanda, I said, my voice hollow. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even want to try. She nodded, her eyes glistening. If you can't, I understand. But I need to hear you say it. I need to know if there's any hope left. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. I wanted to believe we could rebuild. I wanted to believe that love was strong enough to overcome the pain. But every time I thought about trying, I saw those messages. I heard her laughter, her lies, her whispered apologies. I think we need to let go, I said finally. I think we need to move on. I can't live like this anymore. And I don't think you can either. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a quiet sob. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, John. I know, I said, my voice soft. But sometimes sorry isn't enough. We separated soon after that conversation. The decision wasn't made lightly, but once it was done, a strange sense of relief settled over me. The constant tension, the unspoken resentment, it began to fade. Amanda moved out, and I stayed in the house, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. In the months that followed, I started rebuilding. I leaned on friends, sought counseling, and threw myself into my work. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with family, and found joy in the little things again. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the memories crept back in, threatening to pull me under. But I kept moving forward. Amanda and I stayed civil, especially for the sake of the kids. We worked out a co-parenting arrangement that kept their lives as stable as possible. Over time, the anger faded, replaced by a quiet understanding. I didn't hate her anymore, but I couldn't forget what she'd done. Years later, I met someone new. She was kind and patient, and she didn't ask me to rush. She let me heal at my own pace, never pressing me to share more than I was ready to give. Slowly, I opened up. Slowly, I started to believe in love again. Looking back, I see that Amanda's betrayal, as painful as it was, didn't destroy me. It forced me to confront the cracks in my own life, to reevaluate what I wanted and deserved. I learned that trust is fragile, that love alone isn't always enough, but also that healing is possible. Now, I'm in a better place. The scars remain, but they don't define me. I found happiness again, not because I forgot what happened, but because I chose to let it go. And for the first time in a long time, I feel free.